Everyone, welcome back to another week of spreading the message of peace and liberty. I'm joined by my good friend Jamie Sherman, who is the creator of the Voluntaryist comic book series, which you can see right behind me. You can find it at volcomic.com. It's VOLCOMIC. I love the comics. I read through all of them earlier. They're super well written, super well drawn. But whether it's this comic book series or Freedom Tunes or any of these other cartoon series, I think one of the best ways to reach more people is through laughs and fun. So Jamie, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen you. I met you and your wife at the Tom Wood's 1000th episode event, which was amazing. And funny story, I don't know if you remember this. Me and TJ Ecker, we went and bought a 12-pack of Heineken, brought it back in. I remember I offered you and your wife a beer, and we were all sitting down having a beer. Then the lady came over and like kicked us out of the bar. So she was like, "You can't drink this beer in the bar." And we all moved like 20 feet over, like right outside the bar. So I don't know if you remember that.
I remember some of it. I was kind of like inside and outside, and then you guys were right next to like where the food court was. Then you like moved from one place to the other, and then by the end of it, you had made your way into the hot tub, even though it was roped off because of the rain.
I got kicked out right away.
You got kicked out, yeah. And all the security guards are coming toward you, like, oh, I guess they're gonna come get him. But they were actually super chill. It was awesome. I mean, that was like kind of the defining difference between police and private security. Like private security is not trying to, rough you up or get you in trouble. They just kind of like want to, get you back.
Oh, they
to
want
your
you to leave a
room.
good review. Yeah. Well, yeah. So let's talk anarcho-capitalism for a minute. So for me personally, I think most people deep down are anarchists. They just don't know it. I think most people prefer to direct their own actions and live in peace, But how did you find out about anarcho-capitalism? For me, it was Tom Woods, Walter Block, and of course, Murray Rothbard.
Awesome. Yeah. For me, I guess the concept maybe would have come more through Tom Woods and Rothbard a bit. I would say, voluntarism was kind of the path that I went down conceptually, and a lot of it was my own personal journey, researching and looking things up with government history, and then eventually coming across some stuff with Alex Jones, and then other things down the path, like Mark Stevens of the No State Project and things like that. So it wasn't necessarily some major author who led me down that path, like Mises, or Hayek or something like that. It more just was my own personal research, and then eventually into some, different types of people who talk about what government action really is. So,
like, how did you start off? Did you grow up in like a conservative family, liberal family? How did you evolve?
Sure. So the fuller story would be that I grew up in a conservative Christian home. And specifically, kind of, I guess you could say like very neoconish, at least at the time, growing up and things like that, big supporters of Israel and all that good stuff that you typically have. And so, I grew up in that mentality, but I still had a penchant for liberty and individual rights. And so I thought through that lens, but it was obviously inconsistent. And it wasn't until I was, a sophomore in college, or actually, it was actually freshman in college, just the end of the year. And I had a history class, and the professor was talking about the eugenics movement, and that led me to do a lot of research and kind of propelled my path down that way. So,
it's interesting you mentioned that. I learned in my psych class, we were talking about the Tuskegee study. I'm sure you know about that, where like 600 black men or something like that were given syphilis. One thing my teacher didn't mention is that it was done under the guise of giving people free health care. She didn't mention that part. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that happens quite a bit, actually. The same happens to military members. Often the government will give them experimental vaccines or other types of shots before they go out. And if you talk to a lot of people who are ex-military, especially Vietnam War, you will hear stories about them being shot up with something before going out and having crazy reactions.
Yeah, all the military around the world. I think like Japanese soldiers were high on meth or whatever. They tried a bunch of drugs on our soldiers. Now we could just talk about that for like an hour. But yeah, that's great. Well, anyways, I want to get into your comic book series. So when did you start this comic book series? Because like I said, I love it. It's super well drawn, super well written. When did you start?
Thank you. Yeah, I actually started because I was somewhat bored while studying for the bar exam after law school. So
Oh,
I
Lord.
was,
Okay.
yeah, I was just thinking about how awesome it would be to have a liberty themed, truly liberty themed, voluntarist themed superhero comic where the fundamental norm of the universe is that government is unethical. Because I just looked around and I said, nobody's doing this. Nobody is having a system of ethics as voluntarism be the foundation of the story. Most every comic, cartoon, anime, movie you can imagine, they have a philosophy behind it. Even when people say, "Oh, I don't like politics and stuff with my, comic entertainment," it's just not true. Every single one has an underlying theme based on what's seen as right or wrong by the protagonist and what's seen as acceptable in the storyline. So it just didn't exist. I'm like, well, if nobody's going to do this, I might as well go ahead and do it because I wanted to really see that happen. So I just started writing it and then prototyping it and just ran with it. And, I kind of blindly ran with it because I didn't, have any crazy comic book making experience. I wasn't a specific artist who, practice drawing comic book style drawings. So a lot of it was, me just kind of figuring out as I went along. I mean, I had some background in graphic design and things like that, but I just, went with it and said, this just needs to happen more as a fan than anything. I just wanted to see it. I wanted to go and read it. I wanted to go see it in a theater. So,
And you've had great success so far. I mean, I guess my next question is, what's your production process like? Because I think you mentioned to me, offline, you don't do all the drawing, or how does the production process work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, comics typically take several people to make. A lot of people have a misconception that a comic book is just one person and they write the story and they draw it out and they like put it all together themselves. That's just not true. The most common thing is there's a writer or maybe even two writers. There's someone who does the pencils, that lays down, layout. There's someone who does flats or colors and things like that. There's someone who does ink. In other words, they do digital ink over the pencils that were hand drawn, very often. There's someone who does letters. There's someone who is putting it together, to be ready for print and things like that. So I take on some of those aspects and roles in little ways. I've like lettered once and I've done some color adjustments, this and that. But over the years, I've worked with a number of different artists and teams. And now I kind of have a main go-to company that I have a very good working relationship with. And so we work together on it. And that's, we kind of have now a Voluntaryist origins going forward is that consistency. So it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun, but
I mean,
a
like
lot
you
of
said,
work.
you have a little bit of background in graphic design, but going into this, I mean, you had to learn a lot, I imagine, when you first went into this. Like, how the hell do I start a comic book series? Because, that's an awesome idea, but I wouldn't have thought to do it. So,
Yeah. I mean, it takes, I mean, for me, it was natural from just my upbringing. I liked comics. I liked animated films and things like that. You might see some, Godzilla stuff back there. Godzilla was one of my favorite things. And I just always loved fantasy and things like that and cosplay and dressing up. So I figured I'd do something in that genre, in that vein, but, I'd never done it before, but I just decided to self-direct my education and, research it and read about it until I, figured out all the things I needed to do to get it going, and just went from there.
if you may ask, how many copies have you sold so far? If that's something you're able to give away, I mean, I just want to know how successful you were.
I don't know the exact number offhand, between the campaigns, and then there's also like direct sales, but it's, I don't know, something in the 1,000, I'm guessing, based on between the actual campaigns and the, direct, sales kind of thing. So something over there that is for physical copies. And there's also people who read the digital copy, they download that or they buy the digital and stuff like that. So over the years, I would have to guess the readership's been in several thousand based on my estimate.
What year did you start again?
2012 technically is when I began, and the first one kind of was like released out by 2013. So it's been around for about 6 years.
Wow.
So the readership, I'd say, is in the thousands in terms of people who have, at least just based on what I see on web statistics and downloads, stuff like that, in the thousands. But I mean, it's something that even that to me, is impressive just because I'm doing something that's such a niche. I mean, we're talking about a niche of a niche. You literally have, libertarianism, voluntarism, and then, you also like comics. And then it's like, you also like superhero comics because there's some people who just are sticklers and they don't like certain types of comics, So, I mean, I'm impressed that it's done as well as it has, but it's been growing more than ever. And I think, it's only natural with what you see going on right now with all the Marvel movies and the DC movies, and every young person loves anime. the weebification of America, you could say. But
Yeah. No, it's funny. When I was reading through one of the comics earlier, I pulled up an ad. It was for my friend's page, Actual Anarchy, from Daniel Elwood's my good friend. So that's funny. You run ads through your books.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've had people who have been awesome supporters, and he definitely was. And the Actual Anarchy podcast, got a centerfold, awesome advertisement there. I really like their advertisement. It looks cool. It's like they could, put that as a centerpiece on and frame it. It's an awesome image. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're my really good friends. So it's funny when I saw that. I didn't know he had an ad in the book, and I was like, you didn't tell me this. So all right, let's start talking about the comic book. So I think you have 5 out right now, and I think you just finished up a fundraiser for a production for another one.
Yep. Yeah. So the ones that are out, and the ones I can see behind you are the main ones that are out for release. The Voluntaryist #1 incorporates 2 other Indiegogo campaigns. The second campaign and like the Voluntaryist versus the TSA, because they're just little short tidbits. So I kind of combined those things because the first few campaigns ended up being prototypes for the future, kind of just rough drafts of what could be. And now the origin story is the real canon thing going on. And so we have the Origins first issue that's already come out, and now Origins 2 just completed its funding. So I'm just right now waiting for the funding to come through, and then we're going to begin the production process with Short Fuse, which is the company I work with.
Yeah, so your issue #1, it's the Origins right behind me. So when you were creating this, did you imagine that, I should just keep this like really short, I'm just going to keep it like the ideas of the character, then everything else will flow from that? Or did that kind of, did you plan that?
It's interesting. I kind of, when I went through the original first campaigns, I changed up how I did things just because I was trying to cater to the market and play a little bit just to get more interest. I wrote the story originally through and through all the Origins. I mean, in terms of the actual writing portion, I wrote it very far ahead. So I know the universe quite well, and there's some things that I touch up and modernize and fix up over time, but I have the full Voluntaryist story and several arcs already done. So I know, kind of where things are going to eventually head. But when I was doing it in the fundraisers, I kind of wanted to spark some more interest just generally. And that's why I did things like do the State as Zombies issue for fun as a Futureverse thing, just because Walking Dead was very popular at the time. And I was like, okay, let me play off this zombie love right now and do that. And that ended up being a great thing because people liked it and it helped get some more interest in the comic series.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, yeah. With Snowden and Assange and the revelations, like that just led to me doing that kind of thing and playing off of that, just kind of a future prototype. But it was a lot of fun, and I just kind of rolled with some of the major themes of, national news and politics. So, but now I'm back on the main track, and I'm going to keep going that way.
Well, yeah, I'm just going to mention that when I read these books, it's like you could write these till you die. I mean, the storylines could just go on and on and on. I love the State as Zombie one because I won't give too much away, but obviously the zombies are saying stuff like roads and social contract and just, and if you've ever seen an interview with a zombie with Tom Woods and Bob Murphy, it's like the same thing. It's like they are literally zombies. They talk in zombie-like sentences.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just a fun play off of it. I mean, and as you saw, those are kind of more insider things. Like you kind of have to know the lingo to get it. But it was okay because that was my point. I was trying to pander to those who already knew what was going on to get some, support and interest. But now it kind of goes away from that. Now Voluntaryist is actually really developing the story and the narrative that anybody could jump in on. Anybody could pick up Voluntaryist Origins and read it like as if they were reading the first issue of Spider-Man or the first issue of Captain America or Batman or Superman. It just runs just like that, where you hear about a character and their development and what happens. So, now it's going beyond some of that hype and fun little insider jokes to actually developing a story that really brings about a thought process on the question of what it means to be truly free. So that's kind of the central theme of Voluntaryist.
Right on. Well, tell us about the characters, because I love how you set up the characters. You obviously have your good guys and bad guys like in any other comic, but tell us about the characters. I think the main one's Jack V. Lloyd. Is that the main protagonist? Gotcha.
Exactly. So the story revolves around Jack Lloyd, who he's a kind of a young guy who's graduated college recently in the story, and he comes home to help out with his family. They're working on a farm. They're organic farmers, and his dad has to get some surgery because hip needs a bit of replacement. So he comes home to kind of help out with things, just kill a little bit of time, just be nice to his parents before he goes and starts actually working in an engineering firm, because he was a engineering major. And while he's at home, he gets hit with a chance event, a cosmic radiation event. And this event is kind of what sparks the story in terms of his powers and his development, and also the government's interest in him, because this cosmic event interferes with the government's plans to pretty much enslave humanity once and for all. The government is attempting to kind of create kind of a false flag event to get everyone under its rule, and kind of end all conflicts with other nations and just focus one common enemy. So this kind of messes with some of those plans and puts a wrench in it, and the story develops along that line with voluntarist Jack Lloyd discovering himself, discovering the principles of liberty, and also trying to save his parents and stop the government's plans for total enslavement.
Now, what are his partners like, and what are the villains like? Are there any particular villains that are like standoutish?
Sure. Yeah, I can give a little bit of some background to some of the characters that come forward later, just some of the future prototype universe things that come out there. There's, for example, Voluntaria, who's on the front of State of Zombies, and she's an ex-DEA agent who was affected by the radiation event. She actually left the DEA because she realized just how evil it was, and she was, breaking into people's homes over small amounts of marijuana and ruining their lives, and they were, using it for medical treatment. And she just, kind of clicked, seeing that she was hurting people, not helping. So that's a little bit of her background. There's Ann Cat, who's also the cover of State of Zombies, and she was kind of a little bit of a bookworm, a little bit nerdy, just kind of worked at a bookstore and just liked to keep to herself and just be an avid reader. And she was affected by the cosmic event as well. And she kind of is a, individualist because of her, love for knowledge and individual, kind of principled living, being away from people. And there's Agora, also, again, I'm seeing a cover of the State of Zombies, who was a sex slave worker, forced into sexual slavery, and who escapes her captors because of the event. And, she kind of focuses on those who are trying to, keep people enslaved in human trafficking and things like that. And part of her anger is that one of the reasons why she was kept in there for so long is because government officials were a part of the scheme. They were paying money to the traffickers and themselves getting, whatever kickbacks for. Yeah. I mean, and I draw actually a lot of my material from real life things. I mean, you may have seen already reading through some of it, but I have a lot of Easter eggs in there for real life events of things that have happened with the government. I have a lot of little secret symbolism and things that some people, if or research what I put in there, you might realize that the Voluntaryist story is part fiction, but also part reality. And that's what I hope that people see.
I definitely noticed those Easter eggs. I noticed all of those. So I was hoping other people see those.
Exactly. So it's like every single thing I try to write about is, to me, strikes a chord. It's something that I know about or research about when it comes to government and how government manipulates people or causes, mass harm against people. And so through the comic story, I just hope to, also help people realize that this seems like it's a fictional universe in some ways because there's these crazy characters and powers and stuff. But at the same time, the underlying themes and the actions, they're not actually as far off from fiction as you might think. And that's, part of the series is to get people to think about that and kind of research and develop their own ideas about what's going on in the world.
Well, I love the comic book series. Like I said, everybody can check it out at VOLCOMIC, volcomic.com. Is there anywhere else we can find you?
Sure. There's, facebook.com/volcomic. And there's the youtube.com/the Voluntarists. Pretty much if you put in Voluntarist comic or Vol comic, it's all there. It'll link to the Facebook or to the YouTube and things like that. They're all interconnected. But volcomic.com is the place to go, to one-stop shop for all the universe terminology and links to everything else.
Well, like I said, reading through the books, I was just smiling the whole way. Thank you so much for doing this for the world. And thanks so much for coming on, Jamie.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me on too.
Hey everyone, please like, follow, donate, subscribe, and share. Any donations will be used to reach more people.